Hello and welcome to Number by Color. My name is Todd. Today we are discussing Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Yes, yes, yes. In 2004, 2 years after Kingdom Hearts was released, we finally got the sequel we were all waiting for. Chain of Memories. What's that? That's not the sequel you wanted? Well, that's too bad. That's what we got. Chain of Memories originally released on the Game Boy Advance, and even though it very slightly nudged the Kingdom Hearts story forward, it was not really a great game. At least in my opinion. The story, when it shows up, is mostly okay, but almost everything else about this game is either love it or hate it. However, it's not completely negative because this game does offer some value and fun. It's just that if you don't like the core mechanics, then you're going to be turned off to the entire game because the story, unlike Kingdom Hearts 1, is almost non-existent. So as I mentioned, this game came out 2 years after Kingdom Hearts, and while it's not a true sequel, it was released to bridge the gap between 1 and 2. So it's sort of like getting people back into the Kingdom Hearts mindset so that they would be ready for when Kingdom Hearts 2 came out the following year. However, the core mechanics of this game are unlike the first game, so if you go into it thinking you're going to have an action RPG experience, you might be disappointed. That's because the core mechanics are not normal action RPG hack and slash mechanics. They are now based on cards and deck building. And while this leap does sound strange, it's really not that different in execution, though there are some key elements to the deck building system that make it a little bit finicky and sometimes very frustrating. So I'll talk more about the gameplay in a few minutes. First, I want to touch on the story a little bit. Basically, what's happening here is this game picks up right after Kingdom Hearts 1 ends, where Sora, Donald, and Goofy are walking along a road, they see Pluto, and they are led to Castle Oblivion. When they go inside, they think, or at least Sora thinks, maybe Riku or Mickey are inside. So they decide to explore the castle. However, the castle is there as sort of a trap set by what's known as Organization 13. Although I don't think they're actually referenced as Organization 13 in this game. I think it's maybe just the organization. Anyway, Sora, Donald, and Goofy have to ascend Castle Oblivion in order to regain memories that they may have lost. They are told by members of the organization that to gain memories, they must lose memories. And really the parts of the game that are supposed to drive the story forward are really just a lot of weird exposition and very vague wording by the organization of things we're not really sure of what they're even talking about. So mostly it's to introduce us to these key characters. We're introduced to Axel, Vexen, Marluxia, and Larxene. And these people are sort of plotting something that we don't really understand quite yet, and they interact with Sora here and there. They give him a deck of cards to get through this castle, but that's really the main thing they're there for. They're not really there to help us understand exactly what's happening. See, as you travel through the worlds in this game, nothing happens in the worlds that is relevant to the actual story of the game. It's the in-between segments that actually build on the story, and there is not a lot to build on. It's mostly that Sora's memories are being corrupted and changed by this girl Naminé in order for the organization to sort of manipulate Sora into working with them. Overall, there's not really a lot that happens in this game that affects the rest of the games after, except that you now know what happens between the first game and the second core game. That being said, the part of the story that I'm not discussing, it does do a cool few things, even though it takes a very long time to get there. So moving past the story elements, let's talk about the gameplay mechanics, because that typically is where the Kingdom Hearts games shine. Except this game. Now, honestly, I don't think this game is as bad maybe as some other people might, but the core mechanics have been changed a little bit too much for my taste that it really sort of impairs my experience with the game. So the biggest change to the core mechanics of this game is that instead of action RPG combat, like in the first game, you are using a deck of cards in this game to represent attacks and spells and items and summons, etc., etc., etc. In the simplest of terms, you have melee attack cards, you have magic attack cards, you have item cards, you have summon cards, and you have enemy cards. You can use these pretty much any way you want to, except there are some rules to it which I will explain a little bit. So each card, you'll notice, has a number on the bottom of it, and that number represents its power, so to speak. So not physical attack power or magic attack power, but its power against other cards. So in this game, enemies also use cards in their attacks. So let's say you play a Keyblade card with a number of 1, and an enemy plays an enemy card with a number of 2, their card will break your card, and their attack will land. If these cards are reversed and you play a card with a number 2 and they play a card with a number 1, your card will break their card and your attack will land. This might seem like a very simple concept, and it kind of is, but there are complexities thrown into it as you progress through the game that make it a little bit more interesting and mix things up just enough to make it feel like you're not doing exactly the same thing over and over again every battle. Although by the end of the game, you kind of are doing that, because by then you'll have found what kind of deck loadout is best for you and which makes battles the easiest for you to get through. So you kind of just do repeat the same things over and over again, but kind of learning how to get to that spot is fun enough. But the challenge is there for you if you want it. With that being said, the battles really, when it comes down to it, do feel a lot like Kingdom Hearts 1. Just as a side note, I would recommend not playing this game on the highest difficulty the first time that you play it, because it can be frustrating, especially with the progression system, which I'll talk about now. And really, there's not that much to say. The progression system in this game is that every time you level up, you have the option of choosing either an HP boost or a CP boost. And sometimes you can learn a new ability called a sleight. That's pretty much it. And honestly, that aspect of the progression system is part of the reason why this game is not, in my opinion, as fun as it could be. Because every time you gain a level, you don't feel like you're really getting that much stronger. You're either gaining some HP or you're gaining some CP, which allows you to build a better deck. And honestly, that to me, that is not enough to really incentivize me to keep leveling up, except that some bosses are so tough that you need a little bit more HP or a little bit of a better deck in order to defeat them. Speaking of CP and building decks, I guess I'll talk a little bit about that now. There's not much that I really want to say in this review video, but just for the sake of being as sort of minimally thorough as possible, when you build a deck, each card costs a certain number of points to add to your deck. So depending on the strength of the card you want to add, you have to make sure that you have enough points available for you to add the card to it. So you'll want to make sure that you're using strong enough cards to defeat the enemies, but also cards that don't take up enough points where you only have a few really strong cards in your hand as opposed to a lot of middle grade cards. At this point, you might be wondering if you ever get stronger attack power, and you sort of do. It comes in the form of new Keyblade cards. So whereas in Kingdom Hearts 1 you would get a new Keyblade at the end of every world, in this game you get new Keyblade cards which have either better strength or sometimes a physical attribute to it or a magic attribute to it. Maybe it has like a fire element associated to it. Other than that, there's not really strength per se, it's just the strength of the card is better, except these cards also require more CP to add to your deck, so you need to be careful that you're not only adding the newest best cards to your deck, because it's going to fill up the deck capacity a lot faster. Other than that, there's not much else to the gameplay mechanics. There are what's known as friend cards, where you can summon an ally based on the world that you're in, and they have sort of a special attack. I know it sounds like I'm being pretty hard on the battle system in this game, and I kind of am, but I don't really hate it as much as it might sound like I dislike it, because once you figure out a good deck loadout, you can just go into every battle and pretty much wipe everybody out, and that's pretty satisfying for what it's worth. However, by the end of the game, the enemies have so much health that battles just last a little bit too long for my taste, and the worlds have so many rooms to go through that it just feels like it's very, very padded. So moving on from gameplay and story, I want to take a minute to talk about the sound design and music in this game, because like the first game, the sound design is good, it's solid. Every sound effect pretty much from the first game is here, so if you liked it in the first game, you'll like it here. I personally think the sounds in the Kingdom Hearts series are good. I have some sort of nostalgia feeling for them, so I do like that. The music in this game is also really good. Most of it is just taken from the first game and maybe slightly remixed and changed a little bit, but for the most part it's all the same. So before I get into trophies, there is something else I want to address about this game that I think is pretty cool, and that is that there are actually 2 stories in this game that you can play through. The first one is Sora's story, and the second is actually Riku's story. So once you beat the story with Sora, it unlocks Riku's story. So the cool thing about Riku is that if you didn't like the deck building aspect of Sora's story, you don't even have to worry about that with Riku, because his decks are pre-built and you can't even edit them. So for every world you get a set number of cards and that's it. This makes Riku's story a lot faster paced because there's not as much downtime in between worlds, and really there's not a lot of story in the world, so the worlds are actually shorter than they were in Sora's story, so you really get through things a lot faster. And on top of that, Riku's story is probably way more interesting in my opinion than Sora's story, because Sora's just going up the tower and there's really not much else to it than that. With Riku, he's battling the darkness of Ansem's spirit that's still inside him, and that, to me, is way more interesting than Sora just ascending a tower. So that brings us to the trophies. Now in this game, the trophies are probably worse than Kingdom Hearts 1 as far as monotonous and tedium go, because there are trophies in this game that require you to do things so far beyond what you normally would do as you play through the game. The biggest things that I can think of off the top of my head are the ones for getting Sora and Riku up to level 99 each. There's a trophy for editing Sora's deck 500 times, which is probably 400 or more times more than you would have edited it normally. Honestly, those trophies are probably the worst. There are a couple that are related to doing things outside of the main story, but a lot of the trophies are related to just going through the game like you normally would. There are difficulty related trophies, so you'll want to pay attention to that before you start the game. So if you came here wanting to know if you should or shouldn't play Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories, if you like the Kingdom Hearts series, you should probably try this and check it out, because you might enjoy it. The battle system is different, but it's not horrible, but it's enjoyable enough. So yeah, I think that's it for now. I think that's going to end this review of Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and share this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out, and it lets you stay on top of what I'm doing here at Number by Color. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/numberbycolor, and follow me there too, because I stream every week, and I think it would be great if you came to hang out. For now though, thank you for watching. I gotta go, so I'll see you next time. Have a good night.